Hello world, and we are back. My name's Kyle Fischl. This is going to be episode 200 of my poker vlog. For this one, we are back to our original stomping grounds, Orange City Racing and Card Club, where we get to see a sneak peek at the new tournament area, as well as the live stream area, which will be coming soon. We buy into this 2-5 game for $1,000 before we look down at the first hand of note. With the Queen of Spades and Jack of Clubs in the hijack, on a button straddle, the small blind raised to $25. Not going to 3-bet the offsuit variety of these cards. So we're just going to call from late position. The button calls as well, so I'm going 3 ways to a flop, which comes Queen 9-5 with 2 clubs. Very good board for me, I'd say. Hard to make a pair in No Limit Texas Hold'em. So when the small blind continues for $25, pretty standard call, I'd say. Could even raise at some frequency. Try to price out the Jack 10, random 9s, possibly get value / protection from flush draws, but on this one we choose to just call. The button decides to continue as well, so I'm going 3 ways to a turn card, which is the 4 of diamonds. Complete brick should not change anything at all, and the small blind's going to continue to bet into 2 people, this time for $100. Kind of a big bet, but we're not going to fold top pair just yet.
Full bore and into the abyss!
I'd say our hand is slightly under-repped, as well as the fact that there's a ton of draws that are still available out there that my opponent could be semi-bluffing with. So we call the $100. This time the button folds, means we're heads up to a river card, which is the 8 of clubs. Completes absolutely everything, and now the small blind bets $115. At this point, I think he's very heavily weighted towards just a single top pair. King, Queen, Ace, Queen. Those 2 hands specifically are going to absolutely hate a raise on this river card.
Are you mad? You're afraid to get wet.
If I have Queen Jack with the Jack of Clubs, I usually have Jack 10, King Jack of Clubs. There are a ton of flush and straight possibilities for my exact hand as played, so I'm going to rep one of those hands. Turn this Jack of Clubs blocker, which is a very key card in this scenario, into a bluff, and we are going to raise to $350. Don't see how a single queen can hang on here. I think the $115 bet on the river is very blocker-ish, doesn't want to get bombed off their showdown value, so they just bet a sizing that looks somewhat strong. We're not going to just call this one and lose to King Queen. That seems pretty weak. We're going to put the pedal to the metal and test our opponent. He ends up thinking for about 40 seconds, pretty long tank in a poker table. Then eventually he finds the fold, so our first hand is a bluff raise on the river. It works out. We are going to have a good day today. We get rewarded with our good play by looking down at pocket kings. On the under the gun spot, with no straddle, we raise to $20, simple 4x. A middle position, button, and small blind all decide to call, so I'm going 4 ways to a flop of Queen 8-6 with 2 clubs. I think this is a pretty good board to c-bet on. I mean, any Queen X is paying, club draws, gut shot straight draws, regular straight draws, tons of stuff to get value from, and plenty of opponents to get that value from. So I bet $40 into 3 players, and 2 of them decide to make the call, less comfortable by the second, so we end up going 3 ways to a turn card, which is the 3 of diamonds. When we get such a complete brick, we're going to keep firing here, size up a little bit, try to at least make the draws pay to chase, and hopefully not price out like ace-queen holdings. So we fire $140. And this bet as well doesn't fade anyone. Both players decide to call for $140, hoping for a non-club, one-time dealer, and I'm given the Jack of Spades. Pretty good all things considered, no club. Should have priced out Queen Jack a decent percentage of the time. But on this hand, the small blind thinks for a little bit and then decides to lead for $450.
Fuck, this is gonna hurt.
Quite a stupid spot to be in. At least I don't have a club in my hand. My opponent could be turning like ace, king, king, jack of clubs into bluffs. Seeing that they have no showdown value and this is likely going to check through, betting here might be the only way to win if you have a missed club draw. Additionally, this opponent in particular had a history of overvaluing top pair. He was calling like thousands with just top pair, top kicker all in. and always losing to an overpair. So thinking he could also be a little bit extra tilted from the multiple binds he's in for, thinking that he could just be overvaluing top pair like he's been doing in the past, thinking that kings is a hard hand to fold,
Let's give the people what they came for.
I decide to make the call. When the player behind me folds, the small blind shows 9-10 offsuit. Okay, I guess it was double gutted the whole way, but man, 140 to chase only what I can imagine is 6 clean outs, as the other player likely had clubs. Must be nice to just bang your draw, bang the nuts, and then get the idiot at the table just pay you off. Ugh, that one hurts a lot.
Oh, are you?
Well, I'm clearly tilted because in the big blind with 6-7 of spades, with one limp, the button limps, small blind completes, I'm going to raise to $25, try to take down some dead money, claw back a little bit, but in this one, all 3 players call. So I'm going 4 ways to ace 10-9, rainbow with 1 spade. Well, we have a gutter. Everyone in this hand is a limp caller, so they can almost never have a strong ace here. So I think this one's going to be a bluff by me. I could easily just have like ace-jack here, and most of their hands would be drawing straight dead if they didn't connect with this board. So I continue for $80, bigger sizing, trying not to let like a random 10 feel priced in, maybe king-jack or jack-queen. Might not feel they're getting the right price to chase their gut shots. But for $80, I get one player with position on me to make the call. That's fine, give me a spade, give me an 8, that'd be wonderful. Oh no, we get the 3 of diamonds. Well, for some reason on this one, I just decide that a single 10, single 9, even gut shots might call the flop bet, but they absolutely cannot call a turn bet, and I could easily just have ace X here most of the time.
More. Wait.
So with 6-7, we're going to fire $150 into the middle, and this puts my opponent into the tank for a while, thinking it over, and then eventually folds what they claim was ace 8. So we somehow got an ace to fold. I guess my story about having a strong ace was credible enough to get a better ace to fold if my opponent was telling the truth. We get moved to the main game, and we look down at queen from under the gun. With a button straddle, the small blind double straddles to $20. I raised from under the gun to 45. I didn't really want to go too big here because my chips are actually still in the rack. I just sat down and looked at queens. So I think any raise here is just going to get no respect anyway. So we choose this small sizing, possibly get to induce and then 4-bet rip. And no one's going to believe that I looked down at queens my first hand. And that'd be great. But only the small blind double straddler decides to call. So we end up going heads up to a flop, which is ace 8-3 with 2 hearts. Always an ace out there. Always. But like the last hand, I should have the best aces most of the time, even though none today. I continue for $60, hoping all the heart draws fold. Maybe middling pocket pairs will call. Any aces probably calling. And for $60, the small blind decides to continue. Not what I want to see, and the turn is the 6 of diamonds. On this hand, different from the last one, the queens are showdown value. I beat heart draws, I beat like pocket 9s. 8-9, maybe 8-7. So there's some hands that I beat here, so we're going to try to get to check call mode, see a showdown. So when I check back to turn, the river is the 5 of clubs. And now my opponent leads out for $50. I almost can't contain myself how much I believe this is the weakest ace possible, trying to name their own price.
Maybe nice.
Like, it just screams like ace 3. And I feel like a raise here is just getting called all the time anyway. It's like the most obvious blocker bet I've ever seen. And I guess earlier in the day, I was willing to punish these blocker bets by raise bluffing river. But on this one, I choose to just call, so I can see the ace 7 offsuit. Maybe that hand particularly folds to a raise, but I don't know, it blocks the straight. Not sure I have the credibility at this new table to get a creative move through, but either way, we choose the weak passive route on this one and get punished. We move to our optimal angle seat eventually and look down at ace 9 of hearts from the hijack. With a button straddle, there's 2 limpers. I raised to $55. Suited ace versus limpers should be good here a lot of the time, but 2 of the limpers decide to call, so I'm going 3 ways to a flop of 9-6 5 rainbow, no hearts. We have top pair, top kicker, but it's a board where we really shouldn't almost ever. So when it checks to me, I decide to take 1 card off and check back. We'll go for value on the turns / happily check call. And we avoid the sometimes check raise from my opponents who would have like 7, 8, pocket 6s, pocket 5s a little more often than me. So when we check it back, the turn is the king of diamonds. It's a great card for me if it checks to me. It means my opponents pretty much never have a king, and my second pair now is always good, and now I have kind of a range advantage. But on this card, the small blind leads out for $60, and then the big blind calls. Well, as played, I'm not going to fold to a single bet. Hopefully my opponents turn backdoor diamonds. Maybe they're valuing pocket sevens, pocket eights some of the time. Maybe even bluffing with Jack 10, Queen Jack for gutters. Either way, we are 3 ways to a river card, which is the 10 of diamonds. Both an overcard and completing diamonds. Very bad one for me, but thankfully the small blind checks. All right, maybe I can bluff this one, get this opponent off a king here if it checks to me. Nope, this time the big blind leads out for $140. With a player left behind, we flopped a pretty good hand to start this one, but the run out really did not cooperate for kind of a risky line, I guess. I guess you could bet pretty big on the flop here to protect your top pair, but we do need some stronger hands in our check calling range. Without backdoor hearts, I think that this one's going to be one of those. And with this particular run out, we're just going to fold. The other player folds, and we're never going to know what this player had. But now we look down on the button of ace of hearts, jack of clubs. I button straddle with one limp. I raise it to $40. Only the limper calls, so we are heads up to a flop, which comes ace 5-3 all clubs. Well, that one's pretty good. Top pair, jack high flush draw. Seems like one of the best boards I've seen all day. On monotone boards, we're supposed to bet small here with like our entire range. So pair of aces plus club draw is going to be a down bet as well. We bet $30 and our opponent decides to make the call. When the turn is the 10 of diamonds. Well, we're not slowing down here. Maybe my opponent just has the naked king of clubs. Can't let that card see a river for cheap, so we bet $85. And on this one, my opponent just folds, so it's not a big pot. I wouldn't even call it a noteworthy pot, but it is winning, and winning has not been prevalent too much for me today. As seen by the next hand, where we just get pocket tens and a pretty nothing board, but our opponent had pocket jacks. A lot of hands like this are just frustrating when they're happening consistently. Just your opponent seems to always have you pipped just a little bit. Annoying. We decided table change because maybe that will solve my problems, but I look down at queen 10 of diamonds from middle position. With a button straddle, the big blind limps. I'm in middle position. I raised to $45. Suited Broadway cards seems reasonable, especially versus a limp. But one late position player and the big blind decide to call. So I'm going 3 ways to a flop of jack 8-5. Rainbow with 1 diamond. All right, we have a gutter. We have backdoor diamonds. Seems pretty good. But in between 2 players, I think my hand has enough equity to be able to call a bet. But if I bet and get raised, it pretty much has to fold. And we don't really want to fold gut shots and overs and backdoor flushes. So this one's going to be one of those check calls from me. When I check, the player in position of me checks behind. And then the turn card is the ace of spades. So we turn double gutted plus a range advantage. And when the big blind checks to me a second time, all right, he can never really have an ace here. And I expect the player with position to c-bet when checked to at least some of the time with random ace X's trying to steal what's a decent sized pot. So I'm going to go for a bluff here, try to rep an ace myself, and fall back on my double gut shot if needed. So I throw out a bet of $60 thinking that it's going to work a ton of the time, and the times that it gets called, I have 8 outs to basically the nuts, so seems pretty decently. But the player behind me raises to $150. Well, that's quite devastating. I don't think I'm going to chase on this one. I don't think this opponent ever has less than an ace. I mean, this guy might even have ace jack, to be honest. It doesn't quite change the amount of outs I have, but it does change my routes to victory, because if I call here and then lead river when I connect and just check fold when I miss, it's a little face up. He might find some folds here. I don't know. It's just not quite my day today. I let it go. And my opponent just decides to show ace king. So, you know, late position doesn't 3-bet ace king. Doesn't bet when checked to him with ace king on jack high board. That one's kind of reasonable. But then gets to raise on the turn ace and get pretty much max value against queen 10 high. This brings me to a final hand of note. Now it's my turn for ace king. With 4 $10 limps, I look down at ace king offsuit. I raise to $80. Yes, we're going big with this one. Definitely don't want it 4 ways. Heads up in position would be preferable, but even taking down 40 uncontested pre seems like an okay result. To 80, one player in early position decides to call. Everyone else folds, so we are heads up to a flop, which comes king, queen, 9, rainbow. Definitely like top pair, better than completely missing, but we lose to jack 10, king, queen, queen, 9. Tons of hands to be concerned about, and the hands that we're beating, like queen, jack, king, 10, all have a decent amount of equity against us, so it's not the cleanest flop I've ever seen. When my opponent checks to me, I decide to take one street of pot control now and check it back. Can easily and happily check, call turn, or value bet ourselves. So when the turn is the 4 of spades and my opponent checks to me a second time, now we're going to go for some value. We bet $85. It's around half pot. My opponent does not take too long before making the call, and the river is the 3 of diamond. When my opponent checks to me, I definitely need to go for a bet here around half pot, at least $150, maybe $200. But I actually decided to check here. I got gun shy. I thought that my opponent's most likely hand would be like queen 10, 10 9, maybe ace jack or ace 10. Hands that definitely have a single blocker to the nuts, going for a gut shot on all streets. And I'm afraid of those hands turning themselves into bluffs would put me in a pretty dicey spot, especially when I'm down on the day. So I take another weak passive choice and check. My opponent says he has a 9, and I would say that kind of checks out, either 10-9 or jack-9. Probably not going to call a bet, but might choose to get spicy with those hands specifically if I put out a bet myself. But after playing this hand, I realized that I'm playing nowhere near my best. I don't even think I'm playing well today. So I decided to rack it up. After 3 hours, we're down $900, which equates to $300 an hour or 60 big blinds an hour going the other direction. Yeah, session defining hand is definitely pocket kings. I suppose in 3-way pots, if you're led into on the river, you could probably just always fold. I guess that'd be a pretty fine exploit at 2-5 and below. That is pretty safe to do consistently. Today I was not able to find the fold. Kings, I think, is just a little too strong when we beat hands like ace-queen that might play this way, as well as some bluffs that might be a little optimistic to think your opponents have. You know, river lead bluffs, but we will simply just learn for next time. If you made all this point, thank you. I appreciate it. Please consider subscribing. It would help me out a great deal, and I will see you on the next one.